Humphrey with LukeHumphreyRunning.com. I'm also the author of the Hansons Marathon Method book series, which is based on the coaching philosophy of Kevin and Keith Hanson. And if you've known about those guys and what they've done for the sport, followed their training plans, then the 16-mile long run has come up quite a bit. And ever since I've been a part of the program and Kevin and Keith allowed me to write the books on their philosophy, that is definitely the biggest criticism that we have gotten as a trio, I guess, no better way to put it, that the 16-mile long run isn't enough, and you have to run a 20-mile long run in order to be successful at the marathon, which, the thing that's funny about that is that really when people say that, it's pretty obvious to us that they haven't looked at what the rest of the schedule entails, and they've solely focused on one aspect of the training plan. And so I think if you knew any of us, you would know that it's not necessarily about 16 miles or anything longer. It's really more about what's appropriate. And so today's video is going to talk about that, the case for the long run that's appropriate based on what you're doing the other 6 days of the week. Okay, so there's what I would say is the four biggest misconceptions just based on how people react to me and things that I've seen on other people's podcasts or articles that don't agree with us, just to put it nicely. But the biggest one is that the 16 miles long run is part of a less is more approach, which I think is furthest from the truth, right? I think if you look at the books, if you take a copy of Hansons Marathon Method book and you look at the 16-mile long run as part of those plans, it is quite easily noticed that is farthest thing from the truth. I mean, you're running into the 50s for weekly mileage, which is far from what you would consider a less is more approach. You're running 6 days a week, and you are doing workouts with Kevin and Keith coined SOS days, Tuesday, Thursday, a long run on Sunday, and then you come right back and do that process again. So it is definitely not a less is more approach. What it is that it's just not the vast majority of what you're doing for the week. And so the second thing is the primary focus of a marathon training plan should solely focus on the long run. And to me, like when people say doing a 16-mile long run is the easy way out, I think it's not, because what I'm asking you to do is back off what you're doing for the long run so that you can incorporate more things during the week that are going to make you a better marathoner as well. So to me, when you say, oh, I have to do a 20-mile long run, but yet you're only running 40 miles a week, now you're talking about the easy way out, because you're basically saying as long as you can run 20 milers, you can survive a marathon, which is true, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be your best marathon. And then the third one, what is done surrounding the long run, is independent to the long run itself. And it goes back to what I was saying, is that if the long run is the primary focus of your training plan, then what happens is you're not doing really anything before the long run, and then you're recovering from the long run by taking 2 or 3 easy days afterwards. So you've really surrounded an entire week or 7-day period around one thing. And so if you can do other things, and when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about SOS days, so a marathon pace run, what we call a tempo run, or a strength or a speed workout, doing those two things the week of the long run, and then turning right around and doing another speed or strength day the following Tuesday, the long run essentially becomes part of the overall training, not the sole focus of the training. And so everything we're doing around that is going to impact the long run, not be an independent factor. So to me, it all is intertwined, and as soon as you pull one thing out to make the long run the primary focus, you run into trouble. And the next thing is that there's only one way to approach a long run. So to me, what I feel like is when you talk about 20-mile long runs and you're only doing 30 to 40 miles a week, it's really pretty much a long run that's really slow. It's significantly slower than your marathon pace. And I am saying that there are other ways to approach a long run, whether it's just a significantly faster overall pace, but a slightly less volume, or adding other components into it. And I think there's many ways to do that. So now, looking at Strava data, we can kind of get some more information on that. And so in 2016, this is from Outside Magazine, this is looking at the 12 weeks prior to completing a marathon. And so what they found was that sub 3-hour marathoners averaged 50 miles a week for the 12 weeks leading up to the marathon. 3 to 4 hour marathoners averaged 35 miles a week. 4 to 5 hour marathoners averaged 30 miles a week, and then 5+ hour marathoners really averaged 20 miles a week for 12 weeks, which, on average, it means somewhere, probably weeks 12 through 8 were a little less. 8 through 2 weeks to go were the highest, and then 2 weeks of a taper, which brought that average down to where it was. The only thing I would say to this is that when you look at a 3 to 4 hour range, that's a huge range, right? And I would say anybody who's run 3:59 would recognize that there's a huge difference between 3:59 and 3:01, right? And so I think you have to break that up a little bit. And what I would say is when you get down to closer to that 3 hours, they're going to look more like the sub 3 and be closer to that 50 miles a week average. The, say the 3:45 to 4 hours are probably going to be, 25 to 30 miles a week. And then you bring it together for that full hour breakup of range, you're going to be averaging 35 miles a week. So, the main point of that is the slower you run, and please don't take that the wrong way. I'm literally saying that 3 hours is faster than 4 hours. So 4 hours is slower than 3 hours. And that's all I mean by that. So please don't take that personally, is that the slower you run on average, the less mileage you are running. And so I think that is a key component to that. And that's pretty evident when you look at how far times have slowed down over the last 30, 40 years. Look at this is looking at the Boston Marathon, which is, really the fastest major marathon, in the world. As far as you have to qualify, you have to run certain times to get in. A lot of people are left on the short end of the stick on that one, but across the board, across age and gender, it's the fastest marathon. It's the Super Bowl of marathoning, right? And so you have to run fast to get in. And so I think that it is important to look at this data. And so in 2017, Women's Running actually published some Strava data, and the average qualifier ran 5.3 days a week at about 40 miles a week. So again, that's regardless of age, gender, age group, so that's, under 35 up to, 75 plus. Note that on average, 2 weeks before the race was the peak. Long runs were labeled as such with a run over 15 miles. So all that means is anything over 15 miles was labeled a long run. And with those long runs, they found that the average person ran about 4 long runs over the 12 weeks leading up to Boston. So they basically averaged a long run every 3 weeks. And that would be technically anything over 15 miles. But I would argue that, if you look at other data as far as how long they were on their feet, so anything like anything over an hour and a half, I actually consider more of a longer run as well. You could have had a lot of people run 14, 15 mile long runs that didn't meet their criteria. And then the average long run was 19 miles leading up to that. So I think that's important. So even the fastest marathoners in the world, age graded, those things like that, aren't necessarily putting a lot of 20 milers and calling it that's their key to running the marathon. But also when you look at that, on average, they're averaging 40 miles a week, which tends to say when you take a big group of that, which you're talking, 30,000 people, I would say that the faster runners are probably running more than that, which means they're probably going to be running the longer long runs as well. When you back it down to like the 3:30 and below, they're probably at that 35 to 40 miles a week, and the long runs are probably going to be well under that 19-mile range. But the point is that to me, it shows that you don't necessarily need that or need it very often in order to get the effects. And so to me, what that means overall is that the data doesn't show. The data shows that people aren't just running a bunch of 20 milers in their plans, and if they are, they're running more mileage, right? So that it doesn't equate to a person running 30 miles a week with 20 of that coming from a long run. If they're running 30 miles a week, chances are their long runs are much shorter. 20-mile long runs, the 20-mile long run rule really comes from a time when runners are running more mileage and running faster. And by that, if you look at data from, say, the 70s and 80s, early 80s, you had a lot less people running a marathon, and times were much, much faster. And when you break that down and further, they were running more mileage. It was more your dreaded air quotes, more hardcore group. These were the people who were really, they were willing to line up without a road shut off and just race and take their chances with traffic, right? They were pretty serious runners. They were, you read the stories from those guys back in the day, and you're running a lot of mileage, and it was 100-mile weeks for the average runner was a lot more common because the average runner then was more hardcore. So hopefully that makes sense. But as a sport, we've grown, and as a result, we've slowed down and we run less overall because we're trying to be more inclusive to people, and you have more people of all abilities doing it, which is a good thing, and I'm not discounting that at all. But one of the byproducts of that is once you open that up to a much larger population, obviously time's going to come down, and a person running, a person working 60 hours a week isn't going to be able to run 80 miles a week on the most part, right? Especially if they have a family and other things going on in their life, they're going to be running much less, but you've opened up running to a whole new subset of population. So I think that's important to note. And then it's not really about 16 or 20, which I think is key, and hopefully the whole thing, hopefully you take away from that, it's about running the distance that fits where you're at. So a 20 miler makes sense if you are a seasoned marathoner and you're running 60 miles a week or more. Yeah, you can definitely make the case for putting in the 20 milers. But if you're a brand new marathoner and you're trying to run 40 miles a week, then a 20 miler that's 50% of your weekly mileage is probably not the best of time spent. We can back that long run off to fit a more appropriate percentage of your weekly volume, and we can incorporate other things that are going to make you a better runner overall, and even more specifically, a better marathoner overall. So ultimately, you're not getting to the point where you're just using a 20-mile long run to survive training. You're using everything in a complete holistic view to make yourself just a better runner, and you're able to actually perform at a higher level and not just survive the marathon. And hopefully that came across today. More about Hansons Marathon Method, follow the method. It's produced Boston qualifiers, Olympians, World Championship team members, all kinds of Olympic trials qualifiers, all kinds of PRs, and it's helped a lot of people learn how to train beyond just surviving marathon training. So the book is available, all major retailers. It is an ebook, paperback, audio book. You can get whatever form fits you best. If you want to purchase directly from me, a paperback copy, just go to lukehumphrey.com/books. Also at lukehumphrey.com, you will find a lot of different podcasts, blog posts that I've written, a lot of different information on there to help you further along if you're not quite ready to make that purchase. But if you are, go ahead and do that. Obviously I'm biased, but it's a great book, and I think it can help you become a better marathoner. All right, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.